I've built hundreds of car setups across different simulations and sold them. And in this video, I'm gonna show you the process behind it. Setups are a deeper layer in sim racing. The kind of depth you feel when you overtake someone on the straight because you just got that little bit of extra top speed. And that just puts a smile on your face because you will have a weapon. Setups are key when you start out with sim racing, when you advance, and when you challenge the absolute top drivers. But the biggest objection in car setup building is I don't understand and I don't know how to change them. And even when I do know what an anti-roll bar does, when do I change it? I'm going to reveal my system, how I build setups, and how to squeeze most out of your car. Let's get into it. Traditional setups will be track specific, but these track specific setups are born from a baseline. Baselines are created on Spa for multiple reasons, and if your car operates properly on Spa, you got such a great baseline that you can carry over anywhere, right? So Spa is the absolute weapon here. Let's take this car. And you see this is Le Mans Ultimate, right? But I did this with ACC, and when I started using like this system that I'm explaining now, it wasn't really a system, but it was something that is created throughout the year. So I took the same approach that I use with all the setups that I build in ACC back to Le Mans Ultimate. It's kind of the same thing. And I'm also testing it in iRacing, and it's pretty much the same because it's just how simulation works. I always take 50% of fuel. Why do I do this? Well, first of all, it gives me a good average on how my race car is going to be. Yeah, we're not gonna drive on 100% all the time, and we're also not gonna drive on like 10% all the time. So a 50% gives me somewhat of an average, right? On the weight of the car, basically the fuel, right? So I'm not looking at anything of the setup. I don't care about numbers, I don't care about dampers, I only care for the first thing. I want to know how fast this car will operate with the max wing setting. Why is this? The max wing on the rear of the car will produce the most downforce, will therefore create a car that will be the fastest in corners. But when I'm car setup building, I don't know if that is actually true. So I need to test that out. Now, a very important step in increasing rear wing is you just created a big amount of pressure on the rear axle. So if you take the default setup, like here, you can see that we have 6 centimeters of rear ride height. The rear ride height is connected to the rear wing. So we need to increase this. But how much? We don't know. So we need to figure out a corner section how we can lock this value and you don't have to change it ever again. That's the weapon of this system, because I can say to you that different parameters will give different behavior in the car, but we want to actually lock in values that we don't have to change afterwards. So ride height. I've actually no idea how much it is, but the rear ride height is important here because that will be on Eau Rouge. Now, let's explain. Now, why is this such an important corner? We're driving 240, and this is kind of a little bit of the balance we want. We don't want to lift, and we want to take that corner with safety, right? The next corner is Blanchiment before the bus stop chicane. So you can see here, I had to lift a little bit to make the corner. That is a good indication we do not have enough of that ride height. So basically, you take this step to get that max wing and get the rear ride height up to the point where El Rouge and Blanchiment start to feel twitchy and dangerous. Then you'll know you'll reach the limit. Now let's make this a little bit simpler here. If we take off all the packers, we get into it later, don't worry, and we'll take the ride height, right? At this moment, we can assume that we have 5 centimeters on the front and 9 on the back. That means we have 4 centimeters of rake, right? If your setup increases the rear packers like this, then we increasing the rake as well. So think about packers as rake increasing. So let's talk about the front packers. Let's say I would have this rake and I will do this. Now my rake reduced by a centimeter because the front is absolutely more up in the air. The best thing about El Rouge Blanchiment is that we're probably compressing the springs to the max. And that's giving us the rake. If we have a car that is behaving nicely on El Rouge Blanchiment under high speed, meaning we don't have to lift and it can take these corners properly. Yeah, you steer the car, it goes where you want it to go. That is the goal here. Now, obviously, when you do a very aggressive steering input, then you might lose it. But if you might be more gentle, then you can maybe get away with it. The goal is to get the most rake in the car to make it digestible for you. Now, let's talk about all the other parameters. Let's talk about spring rates. So, sure, spring rate on the front, increasing it, creates understeer and makes the front end stiffer so we get understeer. But guess what? On Blanchiment and El Rouge, you're not gonna feel this change, right? So these values do not have a lot of influence on the car behavior. Same as for the anti-roll bar. Now a little bit of a hack for you. 99% of all the setups I've built were pretty much always a softer rear anti-roll bar. So I would always go for lower than 50%. So let's 10 is hard, then I would never ever go higher than 5. Like in all my setups, I've never seen very high rear anti-roll bar. Maybe the Porsche and ACC, but that's just a weird car. Now, here's a little bit of a hack for you, and this was very handy in ACC, but also in Le Mans Ultimate and maybe iRacing, I don't know. But a little bit of a negative toe could also help you out in these sections to get additional rotation under high speed. But it's not the first thing you should go. Just keep it close to center, right? Let's talk about everything else now. Because when you figure this out, you got the highest wing, you got the rake understanding. So you got the rake. Let's imagine we did this. We keep this default. And let's assume this was our ideal rake value, 3 centimeters, right? Guess what you did? If your car now has these values, you can take this to every other track. You got the rake set up. Really, I'm not joking. It's really true. If you take this to Portimao, if you take this to Sebring, it doesn't really matter. The maximum, because El Rouge is such an extreme corner, if it survives there, it will thrive everywhere. So you lock these values now, no issues. We got other corner sections, so let's talk about the next corner section to create a balance that the car actually feels safe. Because increasing a bunch of ride height to create a proper rotation in the El Rouge and Blanchiment corner, now all of a sudden we have maybe a very dangerous car on some corner entries. And that is this Pouhon corner. Because now we're hitting the brakes and we have this gentle steering input, the track is kind of a little bit going down, and over here we're going to create a safety net for that massive increase of that ride height. Now you can see here I'm kind of braking, had to lift a little bit, understeering somewhat. So in this, for this instance, I would not really change the car a whole lot because it feels alright. So a little drop of brake bias would really help me out already in that corner. Now in the Pouhon, that is a braking situation. Like I said before, some cars really start to oversteer here. it is a situation where we loading up these front tires, right? And if we have a car that is aerodynamically really punishing on this behavior, under braking, then we need to increase those front packers. Why are we picking packers over different parameters? It's because of this aerodynamics. If we are really feeling that danger, right, we need to increase those packers. Those packers will set the end. Because we're driving so freaking fast on this Puhan entry and we're hitting those brakes, sure, a front spring might make sure the car isn't pitching so fast, but it still will be on the bump stops, on the packers, right? So packer distance, and we're not searching for the perfect behavior in the Puhan, but we need to survive it, right? We cannot spin over there all the time, and we definitely cannot spin or have the fear of spinning, you know? Like every time you go on track and oh my god, I need to do the Puhan again. That is not what we want in a setup. Trust me, you're gonna like make the mistake and lose it, and then your race is over. Now, something changed, obviously, for our Rouge and Blanchiment, because if we increase a centimeter of front packers, we lose some rake. Sometimes, that's why I say you want to be close to the oversteer on the Puhan, but then again, you might not increasing or decreasing this. Now, think about Air Rouge, Blanchiment, with the high wing, probably like almost every setup can do it, with the high wing and an increase of rear ride height and the packers on the second step. You don't have to touch packers again, maybe rear packers, for acceleration purposes. So if you want a little bit rotation on the packers, sure, you can do a little bit of these rear packers. So sometimes you'll find that now all of a sudden with the centimeter packers on the back, we have the same rake again, and now all of a sudden your car is working very nicely. Let's talk about two other sections to tweak your front anti-roll bar, rear anti-roll bar, and spring rates. And if you made it this far into the video, can you please hit that like button? That really helps me out. And also check out the links down below, because my car setup building guide is completely finished, and it's basically another deep dive into this video where everything and the whole system is explained in details and proper videos and build sheets and everything. It's the absolute fastest way, in my opinion, to learn car setups once and for all. Now here we are, and we're hitting those brakes, and you need to think about, like, when we're traveling 140, 130, anti-roll bar on the front and springs are going to be important for this balance. So if you have proper balance here, you don't have to change it. But now we're entering this corner, and you can see on the telemetry down below, I need to kind of jump the throttle a little bit because I have some understeer here, right? Now, this is an indication that the rear springs might be too soft, or the anti-roll bar. Now, which one is it? Just click them down both, or click them up both to create rotation on that area. One click will make a massive difference on that behavior, right? So that doesn't change the rake of the car, that doesn't change the rear packers or anything. Also here, like, that will make the car rotate better, right? And then in the next step, we're gonna talk about what you can change again to make your car even faster on slow corners as well. Now, that's also gonna be important. This section is kind of the same as the previous sector, that like here's a lot of balance to be found on the throttle, braking, trail braking. This is all about springs and anti-roll bars, especially this corner. And this is also what's gonna make you fast on Spa, is not having to lift here. Now we have to lift here, but you could also see that we needed to lift on the first section, right? So a little bit of stiffer springs would help out. So later on in the video, I will also show you the exact setup and how I created the fastest one. But let's just keep going here. We have these settings, for instance, and we might have a little bit of a trouble on the throttle, right? It's kind of like not acting, like it's not turning on the throttle. Now, obviously, if you're a better trail breaker, then you created rotation on these corners and you might not have this issue, right? So that's why I think building your own is so important, because if you're a little bit less skilled, you kind of always skip the radius too much, so you need to rotate the car a bit on throttle most of the time, including myself. I'm also never ever going to pretend to be one of the absolute fastest, but yeah, that's going to be different for everyone. And creating a little bit of that stiffer spring on the back can help the car rotate a bit better. And that's also the same case as for this rear anti-roll bar. Do them both or do one of them. So if one, let's say, start with springs and I think, maybe the spring is all right, whatever, then maybe I need more, then you do the anti-roll bar as well. But I like to keep the rear anti-roll bar softer for a lot of reasons, and that's for the third section. So let's talk about the last step in building the baseline high downforce, because we're still on the high wing. What something you can test immediately? A lot of times, if you found balance in the car on entry, on the fast corners, because we set the rake, we set the packers, we set spring stiffness, then dropping the springs and the anti-roll bars. Why? Because this is complementary to mechanical grip. On the high wing, most likely you can get away with this, but that will also be the absolute features of high wing setup, because you can have a more sluggish car because of the rear wing and this ride height, rake change, extra downforce. So that, let's say this were my values, all of it, then I would drop the anti-roll bar. Now we created some body roll in the car. It will be a little bit, how do you call it? Like a disadvantage for the fast corners. And you could also do that with the springs. And now we created a car that is more compliant and has more mechanical grip and a more like active suspension, which might make the car faster in every slow corner on track. So the hairpins, the chicanes, like turn 1, the last corner, no name, those kinds of corners would really complement on these settings. Now guess what? A Rouge Blanchiment, Pouhan, might still be very safe like this. Now obviously your car can get really sluggish because of it. It's just a test to do them all softer or stiffer springs. So yeah, let's keep the setup like it is. Now I would save this and I would make sure, if I build my own setup, that this was on the edge. Like proper sharp car, right? Really wants to turn, on throttle behavior, sketchy, twitchy, challenging, but at least lots of rotation in the car, right? Then I would save this. I would create a 6.2 as well, and then the 6.2 will just have a bit more ride height and a bit less packers and a maybe stiffer rear anti-roll bar. Why? Because I know that then this car wants to rotate even better from the Spa baseline. It's a really shortcut you can use when, let's say you take this to a track like Imola, for instance, and you find that you have a bit of understeer. You can immediately pick a higher level that is more aggressive on the rake and on the other values. And then if you think, wow, this is too aggressive, you can just go back to your 5.2, and then all of a sudden that car might be perfect. Or if you then have some understeer somewhere, you can gently tweak these values to your liking. Good stuff, Arnoud. That took a long time to explain. Let's go a bit faster with new parameters. So we have the high wing. It's important that you can push the car now on Spa with the high wing, but that will not result in the fastest lap, unfortunately, because we have a lot of straights and the high wing is punishing on straights. But that was never the goal. The goal was to get a good behaving car on Spa with the high wing. So here we go. Then what we do, we drop it. We take everything off. And now nothing will work on the setup. We completely destroyed it. Why? Because it's way too oversteery now. So the rear wing, like I said before, is connected to the rake of the car, right? And we might test the car now with the lowest ride height. We want less rake, Because what did we do? We took off all the pressure of the rear wing, right? If we now drop the rear ride height as well, we're creating a new aerodynamic balance. But this setup, however, is focused on the top speed because low wing gives us the biggest amount of top speed. Now guess what? You go back to the video, like you go back in this clip all the way from the beginning, and you start using aero as trying to do that full throttle, right? Let me show you a clip with this BMW, how that acts on aero. And it's really difficult and challenging. But if your car can do it, then that means, again, you set a great baseline of Rake with low wing that you can bring to Le Mans, that you can bring to Monza, and for any other track where you might consider running a very low wing. Now, another advantage you have of this is you can now compare your high wing and your low wing and see what the top speed differences is between cars, right? Sometimes you don't see a difference. That means you're probably never ever gonna use the low wing. This way I found with the BMW and ACC, I found this out with the Merc and ACC that it just doesn't work. And also with for Le Mans Ultimate, some cars just really are horrible on the lowest wing. Now sure, if you do Le Mans then you need the low wing, but then you'll also know that's gonna be probably a horrible car on that track. Now this is with the lowest wing and I was tweaking the rear ride height to figure out this balance. Now you can see like how it's kind of starting to twitch, but also know that I really needed to lift here. But then again, I'm always like almost here. You can see it really as well on the exit. I got a bit better exit, but as we go through the straight with the low wing, you see the top speed is kind of like giving us a better delta every time we go faster and faster. So it's almost like 2/10 on this straight. Now, at the end, I kind of drove the same lap time with this low wing setup. Now, something to take note of that it was really challenging. But imagine if you could do the same lap time with a low wing compared to the high wing. Guess what? How your straight's gonna be compared to the competition. You're gonna overtake them all on the straight. Again, like I said, it's a lot more challenging to drive a low wing setup, but that's the difference between someone who can drive really well and someone who's kind of a beginner. Yeah, you cannot go get away with that low wing. When you are a beginner. Something I did not tell you about the brake bias. Now brake bias you can change always. Throughout the track, throughout your racing, it's a good idea to keep this one as low as possible. So every time trying to bring it down, also for Le Mans Ultimate, I would always use the 9 understeer. That's really working for me. Yeah, lowest brake bias. Always try to lower it. With low wing, you're gonna have higher brake bias. It's pretty much a guarantee. Why? Because you're braking, you don't have the pressure on the rear axle because of the low wing. Trying to use the rear tires to stop the car harder is just more challenging. Okay, good. So now let's talk about the average. The mid-wing. 1.4 mid-wing. This is the average of the two. Now, I think that currently with Le Mans Ultimate, but also different simulators, why do we take these big steps on the wing? The high wing setup you're gonna use for cornery tracks. The low wing setup you're gonna use for Le Mans, Monza, those kinds of tracks. And the mid wing is when you have a big straight, like Imola or Coda, let's say. Again, you're gonna set this up on Spa and you're gonna have probably an average. So this one is 5, the other one was like 8. Now maybe this will be 7 or something. And we had no packers on the BMW, and we have 2 centimeters of packers on the low wing, so maybe a centimeter. Let's look at that next lap, on that last lap, and explain like how that car physics goes through all these corners on the mid wing and how I like closely got to a 219. I already did 19s, but obviously when I record videos, like I'm not sharp enough or it takes more mental energy to do it. Who knows? But let's show you the lap. A lap on Spa, no alien lap times because I'm not an alien, but a pretty fast one for my doing. So what happened here, this lap we got on the Delta is the lap from the lowest wing. It's very close to the high wing, but with the mid wing, I'm gonna have stability on this on the Rouge Blanchiment section, and you can see how that is complementing our pace on the straight. So this is the difference between the mid wing and the high wing on Spa. Now obviously this setup is really good for Spa because at the end of the day lap time doesn't lie, right? But the car with the mid wing and the adjustments I made was really great on this track. Now let's move further here. Here we have better anti-roll bar settings and spring stiffness. Also brake bias is going to be important. Also for the traction control values, if you have a good setup with a softer anti-roll bar like I explained before, you're not going to rely so much on the traction control settings. So, and that same counts for the spring stiffness and anti-roll bar settings on your ABS and brake bias. If you have proper behavior in the car, you don't have to rely so much on ABS. Now you can see here we're almost second down. Again, we have a great balance here. I really believe, and that's just how I always did it, and I could not explain it any faster than in this video, but high, mid and low wing gives you such an understanding what the car will do and how it acts and how fast it is. And you can see here now on this track that the mid downforce setup, again here on the straight as well, you can see we're like basically not losing anything to the low downforce. You see like the low downforce setup is kind of like we're dropping a little bit of delta, but this is just for racing. It's going to be so much better, and we're almost hitting like 260 here with the BMW, hitting this braking point. Now if I would grind for another 3-4 laps and grind again, we could even get in the 219s because I can push this setup as hard as I can without it killing me. Now think about a solver per car specific. So what I did with my setups, I would know that for instance, this is an Aston Martin. This is, by the way, what you get when you buy setups from me. You get these 15 baselines, and I'm currently adding all soft setups to the Sebring because they are run through Motec. I think they're really important to get most suspension, to get the best lap time there. And because the rain physics now currently in Le Mans Ultimate are so poorly simulated, we can just get away with soft setups. And guess what? Sebring is a soft setup track, and we can carry these soft setups to rainy tracks as well, because soft cars will just perform better in rain. So a little bit of a glitch hack there as well for the ones interested. But these packs that I was now creating, let's say a BMW, was really easy to set up. So I could make a solver for someone who's going to bring this to another track. Sure, on another track, you might need a little bit of a change. You might go a little bit lower brake bias. You might go a little bit different, like packer distance. But I would always originate from this high, mid, or low downforce setup. So you can see here as well, I would make a list where the setups would be most optimally working. And yeah, so let's talk about, let's bring it to that other track and talk about it some more. So let's talk about Fuji for a moment, right? So how would this then work? For me, at least. Obviously, you always need to practice your tracks. If you do a race, if you want to jump in some races, you're always going to test out your setup, right? So I would make that solver and a track choice file to explain you which setup would be most optimally, which baseline would be most optimally on this track. Now guess what? Because on Spa, we created the baseline rake on this section on the Fuji Speedway. We are gonna have this challenging braking, like long ass corner to brake. We figured this out on the Puhan. Car behavior will be quite the same. Again, when I push this on this different levels, so a little bit more packers, a little bit less ride height, a level 5 would be optimally on Spa, a level 4 would be great on this track, and a specific solver I would attach to it to get you started building these setups. Now, I'm really confident And I will definitely, when I started the system, I was testing every other track. Now I don't do that anymore because I know the cars is gonna be great. And with a few tweaks, yeah, you can do your races safely and properly. Now, if you are a really fast driver, let's say you are here in the video still, sure, if you're searching for the world records, then you need to run this to Motec, and you need to be even more aggressive on your rear ride heights, and you need to be having a setup that will be more complementary on even lower TC settings. But I believe that 99% of people are not ready for this. This is like this top edge of people that like in sports, you know, we can all play football, but there's like a very small percentage who's exceptionally good at it, and these setups are not for those people. Now, I didn't talk about dampers in this video because it's already dragging out way too long. Let's look at dampers at this video, where I explain a very straightforward way to just get those dampers in a proper window.